Good morning, everyone. You're here with me, Jen the Taxidermy Witch, and it's early in the morning. What time is it? 6:30, and we are doing Hoodoo in bed. I wake up really early. I'm always awake at 3:33 because I feel like there's a lot of things that can be sent out energetically during that time. So I like to be awake as a defense and not asleep. So there's that. So I'm awake at both of those times of day, and then I take little naps throughout the day, and I change my nap times. I never let my schedule be predictable, because once people start to get to know you, then they can know when you're asleep. And to me, that's one of the ways that I keep my personal defenses up, is changing up my routine, so that even, I don't know what's going to happen all of the time, right? Because people can get into your head, and people can do that via dream walking, like Black Moon Coven was talking about in her videos. I'm really excited about that whole topic, and lucid dreaming and astral projection, right? So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up. I woke up this morning at 3:33, did some kitty cuddle time for you guys, because you guys are really enjoying the kitty cuddle time. For those of you who don't have kitties in your life right now for whatever reason, or cannot. One of my friends and family members here on the Taxidermy Witch said, I need you to keep doing these kitty cuddle time videos, which I'm calling the Otis and Jennifer show or something. But because I can't have cats because I have a Mastiff that would eat them. So, girl, I will keep doing kitty cuddle time so that you don't have to, accidentally be at the store, fall in love with a cat, and then your Mastiff to have a crazy snack. So, my cats are being nuts out there. They won't stop making loud noises. You guys, stop it! Okay, we're reading Hoodoo in bed, and we're reading The Candle and the Crossroads. And this book is really exciting. It's by Orrin Foxwood. Here's why it's exciting, is because it touches on one of my favorite branches of Hoodoo, which is Appalachian Conjure and Southern Root Work, aka some people call it Appalachian Mountain Magic. But there's different names for it, but also the Southern Root Work branch. I'm really excited about that as well. So I need to find a new word replacement for I'm really excited about that. I'm working on it, you guys. So yesterday we read up until page 6 to the Fountains of My Magic, right? So if you guys didn't get to see me read the beginning of this book, at this point you're only one video behind. So go back to the last black and white video on my channel, and there it will be. So I do this series in black and white because straight out of bed, sometimes with color video, you look like a monster. So without makeup, I just really like the vibe of the black and white in the morning. That's why we're in black and white. Alright, so The Foundations of My Magic by Orrin Foxwood. I've got some new friends in bed with me that we picked up at the thrift yesterday. Of course, Claire's in the middle welcoming them in. I feel like we had a good night. They're both really positive, soft energies, and I like them a lot. Alright. The Foundations of My Magic, page 6. My work in the spirit world originated through my mother and sister, as well as the culture in the foothills of Appalachia in West Virginia and outside of Winchester, Virginia. Those of you who know the Winchester rifle, I believe it may have some significance there. I was born with the veil, a subject I will discuss in later chapters. Over the course of my life in Appalachia, I was exposed to the practices of my mother, neighbors, and other people in the family and community who had many of the following gifts or skills. Spirit sight, the ability to perceive invisible beings and the spirit paths. Working by the signs, the ability to synchronize work such as farming, fertility of humans and animals, orcharding, and more with the influence of the zodiacal influences, or to interpret tokens or communication from the unseen spirit world, also known as signs. Okay. Conjuring with spirits, the ability to pray or otherwise call to otherworld beings such as God, angels, ancestral spirits, local nature spirits, crossroad beings, etc., for doing magical workings. Faith healing, the ability to induce physical, emotional, mental, or spiritual healing through direct contact meditation and meditation of divine healing power. Setting magical lights, candle magic. In Hoodoo, we call it setting the lights, right? The ability to use fire in candles especially, or hearth fires, and other flames to set spiritual light to petition or prayers. Okay. Doctoring the root, the ability to use herbs, roots, stones, and animal parts, bones, claws, fur, etc. So up my alley, you know. When I first got into witchcraft, I wasn't like directly into hoodoo, but I knew I wanted to bring taxidermy in it. But isn't it interesting that taxidermy is right there in hoodoo? So that's why probably I feel so connected, because the animal is part of the craft. The bare bones, the furs, the, like they say, claws, you know, every bit of it. The taxidermy, the shell of what once was. Like we've got up here with Effie. And she just watches everything I do all of the time. And I feel that that is such a special, cool energy. And I just wanted to say that. I have tea in the morning. I have a cup here. Super hands. Alright, so praying and or dreaming true. The ability to bring the successful blessings of God or Spirit to a person, place, or thing, as well as predictive or informative dreaming. I think that's a little bit what I was talking about in the beginning of the video when we were talking about getting to someone via astral travel, lucid dreaming, or dream walking. Blessing or cursing, the ability to bring spirit influences, helpful or harmful, to a situation or desire through any of the aforementioned abilities. In this book, I will discuss and share some techniques for honoring these abilities and others. All of the magical practices in my family and community were practical and tied to everyday life. The worker was both feared and revered. He or she was often consulted when all other interventions failed. And I want to say that. I want to read that again and then say a personal story. All the magical practices in my family and community were practical and tied to everyday life. The worker was both feared and revered. He or she was often consulted when all else interventions failed. Now let me say this. My father, who's terribly sick and has been for quite some time with lung issues, he's had parts of his lung removed on both sides. He can no longer have any more removed, because he had asbestosis growing throughout his lungs from working in a place, I can't really say what place it was, of course, for legal reasons, but a facility that exposed him to asbestos in the late 70s and early 80s. And he was a kind enough man to make sure that all of his crew had masks before he did, and such a beautiful man for doing those sorts of things. But look what's going on now. Anyway, after all the surgeries and after the doctor said, we can't do anything else and here's a time on your life. That's insane, less than a year or something, or 2 years they said, 10 or 12 years ago, I can't remember. But ever since that time, he's been on Chinese herbs, acupuncture, because that was his last resort. He's like listening to his 3 children who are like, Dad, try this because we believe in it, and all you have to do is also. And he believed in it because it was the last thing to save his life. And in this, people are also coming to magic and conjure and hoodoo and witchcraft for the same types of last resort. Let's not let it be our last resort, guys. Let's use it as a preventative, like it spoke about just before. These magical practices in the family and community were tied to everyday life. Most witches are out there doing weekly and monthly protection spells for their space, for their house, walls so that no spells can get in. You know what I'm saying? So you want to make sure you're not using it as a last resort, because if you do preventatives, you never need the last resort, right? That's just something I wanted to say. And then you always feel confident and comfortable in what you're doing when you know you have certain protections set. Okay. He or she, yeah, okay. So he or she was often consulted when all else other interventions failed. The services were purchased under the cloak of night. And that's happens still in the Amish community. In loads of communities, actually. These practices were not and are not a counterculture, hobby, or spiritual path. They are a vocation, practice, and perigium. I don't know what that word is, sorry. And have a definite role in society. Understanding this is important to comprehending the philosophical underpinnings of this book. The roots of my conjure are African slave and other ethnic practices mixed in with my Christian belief, Native American practices and European witchcraft, and fairy beliefs. Really eclectic. That's awesome. It gives us all hope that we can make hoodoo a part of an eclectic witchcraft, right? And I am sure there are other elements that I have not identified. Awesome. Alright, so now we're on page 8, and it's talking about why this book, y'all? Why should we have this book in our lives? The fuel for writing this book was my concern that people who are, as my partner Aubrey calls it, magically inclined, read a lot, but too often do very little in the way of applying the practice of magic. So, those of us who are magical folk, we read a lot about it, but we don't tend to sit down and actually do workings and do spells. We know all about it. And that's what he's saying here. In my experience, magic has too often become an intellectual pursuit to the exclusion of actual skills, development, and betterment of everyday life. This approach leaves the worker feeling filled with facts, but void of fulfillment. My mother always said, in the end, we want to take our last breath in this life. It is likely that we will want to know if we are loved, and if we are happy. It's a weird sentence. These practices should enhance the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. That includes inner peace, joy, prosperity, and health, and a host of other blessings. These streams of spirit development, spirituality, mysticism, and magic are enlivened by living. Ooh, they're enlivened by living. Well, then all you have to do is live life lovefully. Lovely? Live life lovely. In my experience, magic has too often become an intellectual pursuit to the exclusion of actual skills, development, betterment of everyday life. This approach leaves the worker... There we go. As my mother said, in the end, when we take our last breath in life, it is likely we will want to know if we are loved, and if we are happy. These practices should enhance the pursuit of life, liberty, and I'm so sorry, I'm so tripped up in where we are. Like so many who walk the magic roads, I have accumulated stacks of books, tons of crystals, temples of statues, and enough herbs and oils to choke a dinosaur. I feel that very same way. That's why I've been sharing on my Etsy page of like, help me get rid of my herbs, buy samples from me. You know, I have 225 different things that I package up and sell. And I did a 200 count the other day. It took me a day and a half to package up. It was nuts. Because I package everything like in paper by hand, and it's been blessed in the moonlights. And oh boy. So that's really cool. But I understand what she's saying. You end up with so many just stockpile of things. That is enough to choke a dinosaur. Too often we look everywhere but in our country, garbage truck outside, and family for solid magical practices. Yet this country is rich in magical lore, techniques, and practices. These practices are overlooked because they are too familiar or close, or they are seen as suspicious and not evolved. The last statement is inaccurate. Folk magic is the mother of temple magic and formalized religion. Ask yourself, is it wise to cast away the root of a plant for the use of its fruits? The fruits live for a season, but the roots live through the seasons. This book looks at the deep-rooted magic of the common folk. With that said, all of us are, to some degree, on a path of self-discovery, life fulfillment, and wholeness. As I have continued to grow in conjure, I have discovered that the cord that weaves wholeness of spirit is best woven with 3 threads: spirituality, mysticism. What time are we at? There we go. 3 threads. Spirituality, mysticism, and magic. I will go deeper into these threads in the next chapter. Seeking magical work without spiritual development and mystical practices is dangerous because it lacks moral fiber, visionary guidance, wisdom, and a sound understanding of the shadowy and light forces that work within you. This book will discuss lore, beliefs, practices, and techniques for witchcraft that conjure rooted in these 3 threads and poised on a foundation of practicality and accessibility. This book is about the conjure way of life, its soul, and to the depth of what my friend Star Casas, who we read her book, Old Style Conjure, Star Casas called Old Style Conjure. Okay, so I read that whole book on my YouTube channel here, chapter by chapter. My Old Style Conjure works with the Bible, the Crossroads, spirits, stones, roots, baths, rivers, trees, living and dead, laying on of hands, sin eating. What's sin eating? If any of y'all know what sin eating is, please let me know. I'm, of course, going to look it up when I think of it, but prayer clothes, altars, setting lights, candles or lamps. We do both candles and lamps on this channel, right? And a host of other materials. It works with cloth from a workman's shirt, coal from deep mines, thread from feed and seed bags, honey and liquor, and other materials found in everyday life. My conjure works with real power placed in everything by spirit. It does not visualize, it knows. God, or the Maker, is not distant. It is close and has spirits sent to us up. Okay. It is close and has spirits sent to us to help us. There we go. My conjure was taught to me by old people, poor people, spirited people, and families who trusted me and let me in on their cherished knowledge. Now we'll be reading on page 10, Magic as a Path to Freedom. I'll link my Etsy in the description below if you're interested in buying herbs. Most of them are custom orders, but if you say I want, 50 for protection, or, whatever the big 50 for love, or love and hexing, or whatever, we can make you any kind of custom order on that. That's what most of my page has been, is just whatever we can create in our wildest dreams, we can dream up, I can make here, and I'll send it to you. Magic as a path to freedom, we're in this book here. Meet your fate at the crossroads. Orion Foxwood, yeah. Good book so far, I'm enjoying it. Are you guys? Alright. Magic as a path to freedom. For years, I have pondered the role of magic in the development of spirit in the human quest for knowing. Ultimately, spirituality, mysticism, and magic are approaches to relating one's own spirit to the spirit of all life. As I have looked deeper into the practical and occult roles of magic, I have found that magic appears to be a partner with the nature of spiritual freedom, which I define as the right to hear the voice of our own spirit and to create a life that is satisfying and meaningful in cultural and planetary context. Magic liberates the seeker from being force-fed a diet of adherence and allows him or her to directly engage, encounter, and exchange with the forces of creation and life from the inside in an aware and co-creative manner. Magic makes its face known where emotional, physical, or spiritual oppression attempts to chain the spirit of humanity. Consider the legendary roles of magic in the exodus of the Jewish tribes from Egypt. Example, the parting of the sea, turning a staff into a serpent, and that goes back to the copper wire thing that we were talking about before in the RH negative and copper video. The staff into the serpent. That's what I was talking about. And so on. The use of voodoo in the Haitian slave revolt of 1791, or the mystic slave revolt of the Italian people led by the Aradia through her Dianic witchcraft. Whether magic played a role in these events, or whether they even occurred at all, is not the point. The fact remains that magic appears in urban myths, mythic battles, fights against oppression, or rebuttal against enforced norms. Magic is a fire that destroys the fetters that bind the spirit. It is a gift to life and humanity that allows us to consciously shape our lives through the direct engagement with the spirit inside life and inside ourselves. I believe that magic, specifically the magical practices of common folk, has always been and always will be associated with human freedom and the quest for a good life. Alright, we do about half an hour. So we have enough time to... Nope, we don't have enough time to read through it all. Who knows? Maybe we do. It all began with the veil. That's where we're at, page 11. I was born in Winchester, Virginia in 1963. Southern and Appalachian folk culture and beliefs were still very much a part of the ways of poor folk, my folk. My folk. Not the same. I wasn't Southern, but I get poor folk. I totally get that. I have often semi-jokingly said that we're po people because we could not afford the last O-R in the word poor. My mother lived by her inner knowing, as did her mother and many of the male elders in the family and community. She consulted God on everything, and she would say, I take my spirit to the throne for heavenly direction. beautiful. She was born with what we call the veil, a placental sheath over the face of the over the face of the baby, indicating that they have a blessing. So placenta, the sac that grows around the baby, it's an organ that the human body creates just for pregnancy. It's quite fantastic and amazing. I buried mine underneath a tree. I believe that roots from a Native American tradition that my father wanted to do. My sister-in-law had suggested to me. So we did that. A lot of cultures eat them. If I could do it over again, I would have saved it for witchcraft. But I could definitely dig up under that tree and get that placenta earth. I'm just saying that if you want to use a magical ingredient that gives life, the placenta would certainly, to me, be that. Plus so many other things. It looks like, and when we get into the new Texas house, I'll show you. I have a picture of my placenta, and it's in a sepia, so that it doesn't look gross, like with blood, and it had clots and whatnot. But it's about this big, and it looks like the tree of life, but it's all these veins growing through it. And again, it looks better in a sepia than it does in a color, in my opinion. So, again, fans of different filterings, aren't I? Okay. So, placenta. So, what it's saying is that there was like this veil over the placenta. I was born with the veil too, as was my beautiful sister Donna. My culture had mixed feelings about the veil. To some, it was seen as a blessing and a call to the pulpit to be a preacher of God's word. For others, it was seen as a curse to be avoided because no good could come from it. In fact, my mom said that when she asked to see me after the birth, the nurses said I was okay, but different. They said I was born with white hair, pointed ears, and the veil. And they already had a preacher ready to pray the devil out of me. This was the equivalent of a form of exorcism. My mother was furious at their audacity and checked out early from the hospital. Needless to say, the exorcism failed. Oh my gosh, does he look like a little... It sounds like he's beautiful. The blessing began to open at the age of 7. Awesome. This opening was premature. It happened when I was visited by the ghost of my grandfather. He came to me gasping for air and hanging from a rope. I was terrified. Jesus. I screamed and my father grew angry, telling me to stop seeking attention and to go to sleep. Finally, my mother said, "Ernie, what is happening?" Ernie is short for Orion. That's cool. His veil is lifting. My mother... Ernie, what? Ernie, it's happening. His veil is lifting. Oh, Ernie was his dad. I see. My mother took me to my grandfather's house to attempt to settle me. Sadly, there he was, swinging from a rope in his barn. Publicly, there is still conjecture about whether he committed suicide or was murdered. That's sad. Both sides are sad. So sad. Privately, we all knew that he had been lynched because he loved a woman from the other side of the tracks. With this token, spirit contact or sign, my life in the spirit world had begun, and there was no turning back. That's terrifying as a young person. As the years rolled along, my tokens expanded from spirits of the dead to local nature spirits, God, Jesus, angels, and man at the crossroads. The man at the crossroads. Is that Legba? Okay, we've got a few minutes, guys. We'll get partially through this, but not all the way through. And the man at the crossroads. And a host of other world beings. Or as we call them, sidewinders. I met snake handlers, faith healers, root doctors, sin eaters, and other spirited people. Most of these workers considered themselves to be fine and upstanding Christian people. I loved going to church, and occasionally Jesus would show up. I often got in trouble for seeing him and asking about his mom. I even preached for a while as a young youth minister and sang in a gospel trio, goddess forbid, at local hymn sings. These are events where gospel singing groups visit churches and worship and praise. They conclude with the Big Sky Picnic or a blessing in the graveyard on Decoration Day, aka Memorial Day Sunday. With all this said, there were troubles in my spirit and they were driving me out of the church. If we are built in God's image, why is his mother not discussed? Why are we supposedly loving people so restrictive with God's love? If we can be like Jesus, then why aren't more miracles performed? If the Psalms came from God's Word, the Bible, and some folks worked with them in magic for a good life, then why was all this being called the devil's work? Why do I feel God's presence more than nature in the church? How can little babies be born sinful when they are precious and innocent? Why does God hate gay people for loving their partners when God is love? Why are women from whence all babies came treated with such disrespect? Why do I have to wait for death to meet God and Jesus directly when I see and talk to them all of the time? Why can't a preacher show me how to use my veil to serve God's work? Why did preachers I know all talk about the faith healing and two-handed preachers who work with the spirits and angels, etc., when they help me in a very real way? Okay, I found that these folks who practice spirit work were helping people in measurable ways. It is restoring an experienced and informed faith that was often broken by blind faith, preachers who had no experience for a loving God. Don't get me wrong, many of these preachers were good people of faith, but they were without direct and tangible experience with God and his or her power. It seemed to me that one cannot bring God's power and presence into people unless he or she is living in it. My blasphemous curiosity and concerns for life, people alive and dead, and my desire to be an agent for God's will and spirit caused me to knock on other doors. First I looked at my feelings without the direction of other humans. I delved deeper into the mother spirit. I fell when I was alone with nature. I went to the Crossroads at night to meet the Dark Rider, a spirit that opens the spirit roads. I stopped waiting for the spirit world to find me. I sought it out, and find it I did. In this beauty and horror, when none of us learned how to walk without it falling down. Okay, and that is the end of the chapter. We got through it. Thanks for joining me, Jen the Taxidermy Witch, not the chapter, but the section. We come back to talk about the role and feel of magic in my folk culture. Alright, guys. See you soon. Bye-bye.